When a purely singular, abstract concept enters the timeline of human history, it arrives at a severe disadvantage. Consider the text of Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4. The Shema, Israel. Hear, O Israel, the Eternal is our God, the Eternal alone. It is an absolute theological axiom defining the uncompromised unity of God. But because this axiom is entirely conceptual and invisible, it is highly vulnerable. It lacks physical mass. Left alone in the minds of a single generation, an invisible idea inevitably erodes under the friction of historical time. This presents a massive engineering problem. How does a society take a purely abstract theological concept and ensure it survives for thousands of years without being distorted, forgotten, or quietly overwritten by the competing cultures that surround it? Abstract theology cannot survive on its own. To withstand the elements of human history, an invisible idea requires a heavily engineered physical and behavioral survival mechanism. We are looking at the verses immediately following the Shema in this ancient scroll. This section, known as the VaEtchanan, provides the structural blueprint meant to solve that exact problem of survival. This text constructs a four-layered defense system. It mandates cognitive alignment, enforces a pedagogical urgency, anchors the idea into physical and spatial reality, and ultimately locks the entire system into a historical feedback loop. To understand exactly how this machinery operates, we will use the 11th century commentary of Rashi as our technical manual. His analysis isolates the exact operational tolerances required by the original Hebrew text. Through Rashi's lens, we see this blueprint actively defending against specific anticipated threats: the duality of human psychology, the pull of cultural assimilation, and the memory-erasing effects of comfort. Deuteronomy 6 is the original architecture of continuance. It is designed to transform a society into a medium for perpetual historical memory. The text's first demand in verse 5 is to love God. Rashi reconstructs this command, taking it out of the realm of passive emotion and defining it as an intense, multi-front cognitive discipline. This diagram shows a spelling anomaly Rashi examines in the word levavcha, with all your heart. It features two bet characters. Rashi deduces this double letter commands the deliberate alignment of both positive and negative human inclinations, bending even destructive drives toward the single axiom. The discipline then escalates to a physical requirement. The text commands devotion with all your nefesh, or soul. Rashi specifies this as absolute adherence to the system, even if the system demands your martyrdom. The third requirement is meodeka, translated as might or property. Rashi notes a harsh reality. Some individuals value their financial capital above their own bodies. The text demands the subordination of that wealth. Rashi provides an alternate definition for meodeka as well. It shares a root with the word for measure. He reads this as the psychological discipline to accept whatever measure of fate, whether absolute good or severe calamity, is meted out by the system. This internal algorithm defines love as an unbreakable cognitive discipline that forcefully aligns a practitioner's mind, physical survival, and capital. However, an internal discipline dies with the individual. For the axiom to survive, it must be aggressively externalized to the next generation. Verse 7 commands VaEtchanan, often translated as teach them diligently. Rashi points out the root word implies sharpening a blade, sharpening the intellect through direct engagement. The operational goal of this sharpening is immediate recall. Disciples, which Rashi equates directly to children, must be prepared to output the core data the moment they are questioned, without hesitation. With the intellect secured, the system anchors the invisible axiom into physical reality. It begins by claiming the biological space of the practitioner. These artifacts are Tefillin. Rashi categorizes them by the exact number of scriptural sections contained within their leather compartments, literally binding the data directly to the user's arm and forehead. The system then expands its territory outward from the body to lay claim to architectural and civic space, requiring these texts to be inscribed on the doorposts of private homes and the gates of cities. The text successfully colonizes both human biology and the built environment. it becomes impossible to navigate routine daily life without physically encountering the abstract axiom. Having built the defense, the text anticipates its primary point of maximum vulnerability. In verses 10 through 15, the timeline shifts to a generation entering a fully developed, highly prosperous landscape. The specific threat arrives in the form of inherited wealth. The incoming generation inherits houses full of goods, hewn cisterns, vineyards, and olive groves that they did absolutely nothing to build or plant. Rashi applies a sharp geological precision to the cisterns. He notes they are hewn out of a country known for stony ground and rocks. The new generation is bypassing the grueling foundational labor required to carve these resources from the stone. The psychological consequence of this unearned prosperity is severe. Physical comfort breeds a dangerous historical amnesia. The struggle that defined the system is forgotten. Verse 14 identifies the immediate danger. This amnesia creates a vacuum. Without the friction of struggle, the original axiom is easily overwritten by the tangible gods of the surrounding cultures. Extreme prosperity, rather than physical persecution, poses the ultimate existential threat to the transmission of the axiom. To survive its own success, the architecture requires a countermeasure. Physical symbols and strict educational routines are brittle. On their own, they cannot survive the extreme environmental pressure of a complacent, wealthy society. The text injects a specialized ethical countermeasure in verse 18. It issues a broad command: do what is right and good in the sight of the Eternal. Rashi assigns a precise legal definition to this phrase, lifnim mishurat hadin. It describes an action taken deliberately beyond the strict boundary of the law, requiring a willingness to make proactive compromises, forfeiting strict, defensible legal rights to maintain social cohesion. This structural flexibility allows the system to absorb social stressors that might otherwise fracture the community. By embedding a mandate for compromise, the law creates a buffer against the friction inherent in a prosperous society. This supra-legal behavior is framed entirely as a mechanism for endurance. It is a mandatory structural component required for the society to successfully possess the land, not an optional moral virtue. Ethical compromise acts as the architecture's final shock absorber. It prevents the entire rigid system from fracturing under the immense weight of generational success. We move to verse 20, the ultimate test of the transmission architecture. It predicts a scenario where a child asks about the meaning of the laws and rules. The text says the child will ask tomorrow. Rashi defines mahar as a deliberate diagnostic tool. It does not mean the literal next day, but rather refers to an unspecified time to come, after the lapse of time. We can reverse engineer the environment that forces this question. By this point, the child is living in a landscape entirely saturated by the physical artifacts, spatial anomalies, and rigid daily routines. Binding leather boxes to the arm, reciting texts upon waking and sleeping, executing extreme ethical compromises. The sheer volume of these non-standard behaviors creates an inescapable environmental friction. That friction forces curiosity. The child's questioning is not a sign of the system failing or a symptom of rebellion. It is the exact intended output of a heavily engineered psychological machine, successfully triggering a deliberate knowledge transfer. Verse 21 prescribes the precise response the parent must give to the child's question. There is a calculated omission here. The parent is instructed not to answer by referencing the abstract theology of the Shema. They do not explain the absolute unity of God. Instead, the parent provides a grounded, starkly verifiable historical narrative. We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and the Eternal freed us with a mighty hand. Metaphysical claims are inherently subject to generational skepticism and debate. By grounding the answer in a shared historical trauma, the system replaces abstract inquiry with a foundational identity. The architecture of continuance is complete. A purely abstract axiom is hardened into physical ritual, defended by deliberate ethical compromise, and finally locked into intergenerational historical memory. Deuteronomy 6 demonstrates that metaphysical truth cannot survive in a purely metaphysical state. To endure against the forces of time, it requires the relentless physical machinery of human history.